Monte Vista, et cetera, et cetera. So my personal philosophy is that it's very important to figure out what is it. Marie Kondo says you want to find what sparks joy. That's what you want to keep. I definitely pay very close attention to students. And in terms of admissions results, I've worked with students who were admitted to the Columbia School of Engineering, UPenn's, Wharton, Marshall at USC, and engineering school at Cornell, along with all sorts of other schools. And I know you're here maybe because it's exciting to hear about like Ivy results, but I really truly enjoy working with students at every level of academics or just personal strength. One of my favorite cases was this kid who got into NYU with, I think, I'm not even sure he had a 3.0, but you know, he just a lot of heart, a lot of spirit. So anyway, we're very accepting and inclusive of all students, not just the ones who want to go to fancy schools. Okay. In terms of the agenda for today, we have 5 parts. Some new things for this college admissions year, the 2020-2021. What is that relationship between extracurricular activities and college applications? Some perspectives from admissions offices, and some ideas for what you might do this summer, and case studies. Maybe that's everyone's favorite. And also, as Ali mentioned, we're going to have some time at the end for a Q&A. Okay, so here's the update. The University of California is not requiring that you submit an SAT or ACT. So they indicate that they're following the guidance. They're kind of following the direction of College Board and ACT. They're seeing how difficult it is to schedule exams. So they're allowing students to not report a score. However, they still let you actually include a score. So what that means is that functionally speaking, if you have a score, you should definitely put it in your application. And a lot of other schools are also going test optional for the same or similar reasons. There's a whole trend about colleges going test optional, but definitely if you're applying to the most selective schools, and let's see, we have a URL here. You can contact us afterwards if you want that information, but this is definitely emphasized by COVID-19. So this is going to be a banner year in terms of seeing their treatment of that policy. The UC in specific is going to let go of the requirement to report letter grades or string, and that's reflecting a trend we see across California. A lot of high schools, because they're not really prepared to teach under shelter-in-place conditions, and as they go online, it's really hard to prepare students get A's and so on. So there are school districts like Palo Alto, we see in Monte Vista, and other places, they're just doing pass-fail. So I know that that's going to have an impact on college applications as well. Refreshingly or not, the Common App essay prompts, they'll be the same as they were for 2019. So there are 7 prompts. By the way, please feel free to, like, if you don't understand anything, just like Ali was mentioning, just chat her, and then I'd love to answer questions in the middle of the presentation, because if you try to remember by the end, you might forget. So please feel free. This is a pretty informal conversation. Okay, so if you look at what's happening in this cycle, I kind of feel like I'm telling you about the weather. Like, oh, it's going to be sunny tomorrow, or like there'll be a thunderstorm. The impact of dropping GPA requirements and dropping SAT or ACT, it means that the extracurricular activities have greater importance, right? If you look at something that has like 3 parts and then you sort of wipe out 2 parts, of course, the surviving component, which are the extracurricular activities, that's going to gain greater importance. So here's a handy dandy diagram to show what I mean. Okay, so when college admissions officers, they're looking at applicants, they're kind of seeing the performance in school, the GPA. They're seeing how you do in a standardized exam like ACT or SAT. And they're looking at how you report your activities. If it's a school that requires a letter of recommendation, they're looking at that. And they're paying close attention also to the essays. But if these two, right, if these two circles are sort of, they have slightly diminished importance, right? When the school districts are issuing pass-fail, and if, let's say you wanted to take the SAT and College Board keeps canceling dates and they're saying they're going to come back later this year, but what if you have to apply and you don't have test score? It means there will be some significant population applying that are not going to report a score. So that means the letters of rec and the extracurricular activities, those are going to be even more important than they might be in other years. So you might say, oh, but Meilin, what does that matter for, I just want my kid to go to the University of California. Okay, but if you look at the actual admit rates, they're not very high. And because you might say, oh, well, can't they just get a great SAT score and great GPA? Unfortunately, when you're looking at admit rates that are like 19, 21, 12%, where it's not that easy. And the average UC GPA for getting into pretty much any UC, it's hovering around 3.9. That's not just for Berkeley and LA, it's pretty much for any UC campus. So how can you tell people apart? It has to be the extracurricular activities. So anyway, there's a handy dandy chart. Okay, so what is an extracurricular activity? It's pretty much anything you do which is beyond attending class. It could be a job, it could be a club activity, it could be a sport, it could be caregiving for a family member. So anything that you spend time on, it has the potential to count as an extracurricular activity. Okay, so do colleges really care, right? That might be your question. The answer is yes. They care a lot, and this is how you can tell. They give a generous amount of space to extracurricular activities on the application. There's a huge amount of space dedicated towards essentially reporting a resume, your activities list, and describing things in the essay portions. The UC in particular, for the first time in December last year, December 2019, they actually sent out a notice that they might be asking, they're randomly going to audit applicants to verify information. So that could mean honors and awards, extracurricular activities, volunteering, and even information you put into the essays. So that's how important. They're gonna pull a move for the IRS. They might even audit you. And then if you fail to provide documentation, they will withdraw your application. So that means withdrawing from the entire UC system. That's a pretty dire consequence. So anyway, and also be honest. So be honest about your extracurricular activities, but yeah, so that's how important they are. Right, because they get your transcript they get from the high school, your SAT and ACT scores they get from the reporting institutions. So what's left? The extracurricular activities. Okay, so in the UC application, there are many different categories of extracurricular activities, and you can report up to 20. Common App has a very, very long list. So I'll just show you, this is just a smattering. They have so many. There's like sports, all kinds of journalism, for family responsibilities. Okay, so so we're trying to count on the UC application how many characters. How many characters do they allow for reporting extracurricular activities? So there are 20 spaces for extracurricular activities. That's right, there are 20. That means jobs, extracurricular activities, educational preparation, non-academic classes. Well, each one, you have, let's see, 500 characters apiece. So that's 1,000. 1,000 characters times 20, that's 20,000. So we figure that's about 4,000 words. Okay, Common App gives space for 10 extracurricular activities, 5 honors and awards. Each activity can have up to, I think, 150 characters. That's about a tweet. Coalition application has space for 8 extracurricular activities, 5 awards and honors. This is something else you want to consider. The essay process. For the UC essays, you pick 4 out of 8, and there's a maximum of 350 for each of those essays. For Common App, for the personal statement, you have an option choosing 1 out of 7, and a maximum of 650 words. 650 words is about a page and a quarter. Most selective colleges, though, they have supplemental essays. Why do you want to attend this college? Why do you want to study in our wonderful departments? And those can be staggeringly long. Like University of Michigan, I think they give you up to another 500 words to talk about how much you want to go to the U of Michigan. So Common App, so if you look at the options, you can tell that some are definitely provoking answers about extracurricular activities. For example, number 8 asks you to describe a problem you've solved or that you'd like to solve. Basically, imagine or tell us about a solution. So if you want to talk about, I've had a student, he talked about how he basically brokered the piece in his robotics team because they were, most people when they write about what they did in robotics, they're talking about, making a robot. But there was actually a lot of conflict. There's like different groups, and he was the peacemaker. So that's a problem he solved, right? So that could actually answer this question. Or maybe you have a certain role in your family, like, oh, I had to figure out how to get my, my little brother to love schoolwork or something. So you could see how a lot of these questions, they're getting you to think about how you spend your time, what have you done with that time. The UC personal insight questions, of which there are 8. Number 1 asks you to talk about leadership experience, influencing other people. So you might do that in a club or a sports team. When you're volunteering, I've had students tell me about mentoring other volunteers. One of my students, he actually got so good at repairing bikes, he was training the adult volunteers how to do it. So that might be a potential response for something like this. So, okay, so on to the next section, talking about perspectives from admissions officers. So why do they want to know about extracurricular activities? Admissions officers know that what potential students do with their time outside of school reveals important personal dimensions that statistics just can't show. So if you can hold down a part-time job or do a lot of volunteering or sport or student government, if you could basically have a lot of responsibilities outside of class while maintaining a strong GPA, what does that tell the AO? It tells them about time management, motivation, leadership, and being able to prioritize. These are all good things when they want people to actually be able to graduate from their college. This is a quote from the Dean of Admissions at Yale. So he says, when parents ask him, what should their son or daughter do with, in terms of extracurricular activities, simply do things you truly enjoy in high school rather than to outguess an admissions committee. Why? Because what you truly enjoy, you're probably going to be good at. You're probably going to get better at it. Whether it's 1 activity, 2, 3, don't obsess on whether it's an activity that everyone else in the world is doing, and therefore that's not going to distinguish you, or an activity that no one's doing and colleges are going to think is bizarre. So he's saying, find that thing that really sparks joy. So what I'm saying is, the Yale Dean of Admissions, he totally agrees with me. Okay, so how do you know you're picking an extracurricular activity that's on the right path? Are you getting something out of it? Are you enjoying it? Are you learning how to do it better? Is it taking you places you wouldn't otherwise have gone? So if so, he says, you're fine, because you're going to talk about it in one of your college essays. Anyway, he ends by saying, my answer is always the same. What is your son or daughter most interested in doing? Because it's the best shot at something that will also be appealing to colleges, because that reflects your true interests. Okay. From former UPenn admissions officer, she says, if you're going to do a popular activity, please, be the best at it. No pressure, okay? And alternatively, do something no one else is doing. But your goal should still be the best at it. I'm like, wow. Okay, that's a lot. Okay. Someone else. So she is reflecting, let's see, especially for highly selective institutions, having top grades and test scores is not enough. They need to have a quality that will appeal to AOs and allow them to visualize how a student might come and enrich their campus community. So sometimes when students are answering questions, they're like, why are they asking me this? And I'm telling them, well, because they want to know, are you going to, if they accept you, are you just going to hide in your dorm? Or are you going to interact with people? Or how will you give something back to the campus community? And that's definitely what they're looking for in the applications process. As parents, right, you have to write checks for tuition. It's very important that people graduate on time. Like, that's actually, right? So let's see, so students who sustain participation for 2 more years in multiple extracurricular activities, they report higher levels of self-control and growth mindset relative to their peers, which is strongly linked to on-time college graduation. So in this study, this is mindsets and the learning environment, a big biodata approach. So somebody took 280,000 college applications and analyzed their relationship to actual college graduation. And so this is what the research shows. If you can actually sustain interest for 2 or more years, it has a huge correlation to graduating on time, as opposed to like in 8 years, right? So that's another reason why extracurricular activities are important. That clearly shows we have a clear connection between actually finishing, like having the persistence to finish everything in college, self-control, discipline, all the things that colleges want. So colleges, I'm sure they knew that even before this research was done, right? Even before somebody did this study. So anyway, I just have that slide in there because, like, hey, the numbers bear it out. Okay. But this is kind of the terrifying part. A machine learning model could accurately predict the graduation rates just at a rate of 73%, just by looking at the data in the high school, in the college applications of these high school students. So if you think about that, anyway, just some food for thought. So again, long before there was machine learning, long before anybody took machine learning models and applied them to college applications, the college admissions officers, they know exactly what they're looking for. Okay, and this is just my personal point. So extracurricular activities are really important because they help you grow personally and they get you ready for college. So there are many great things about them. Okay, On to the next topic. Why, now that we're only a few weeks away from the end of the spring semester, why is summer so important for profile building for your extracurricular activities? Because you have plenty of time and other resources might be available. Maybe one of your parents can drive you, or, right? Or I guess things that you might normally not be able to do during the school year, maybe transportation, things like maybe you're about to get your driver's license, who knows? Anyway, so time and resources are plentiful. So before COVID, what are some things that might be really great to do? Oh, it'd be great. It'd be great to do a lot of volunteering, like 30 hours. I've had students do 30 hours at a food bank. It's one student, he did that every single summer of high school, or full or part-time work, taking community college classes, making up your own business or running your own business. There are plenty of colleges that do pre-college programs like UC Cosmos, Stanford, or maybe a little bit of multiple categories. Okay, but now that we're all sheltering in place, that definitely narrows the scope of the kinds of extracurricular activities you can do. So anything you could do online or from home, those are great things to do, like making masks, taking online classes. A lot of community colleges, even without COVID, they offer classes online. I've had many students run their own businesses online or from home. Or maybe you just do something that's just completely unique, just that only you do, like a TikTok channel, or you make gifts with calligraphy. This is actually a thing. I've also had students resell clothes, flipping hot clothes, or you might even start up an Etsy store if you can do a lot of arts and crafts. So there are plenty of things you could do, and colleges will, right, they will expect that you didn't just stay home and watch YouTube or play World of Warcraft. Okay. So how do you pick an extracurricular activity? Here's some do's and don'ts. Are mommy and daddy constantly hounding you to do it? Like, hey, are you, did you call the tennis teacher? That's probably not a good sign, right? If somebody has to hound you to do it every single time, by the time you're in high school, yeah, that's probably not your thing. Okay. But if you are enjoying it, that's probably a good sign. Are you learning something? Is it becoming a part of you? Like, surprisingly, I've had students really to get super into like the robotics club or something. Like, it's like a cult. I've had students, like, I think this one robotics club, they all dye their hair red. It's completely insane. So it's a lot of fun. Like, if you get really deeply into something, it can be really fun and, yeah, really change you. I've had students sometimes it starts out like, oh, Meilin, I just started doing it for college apps, right? But if let's say they say, oh, Meilin, I knew I had to do something. I'm like, yeah, I know, because otherwise they were doing nothing. So sometimes the motivation is, oh, I'm doing it for college apps. But if they actually start to like it, that's a good sign. Like, oh, no, this is something I could really get into. One of my students started helping out this one nonprofit. They were just wanting a volunteer to freshen up their website. And once they figured out what he could do, they made him do a full website redesign. And then his supervisor at that nonprofit, he pulled him into other projects as well. So anyway, this is just some general thoughts about how to pick extracurricular activities. And now I don't know, this is my favorite, the case studies. So I'm going to share with you examples of 6 of my students who were engaged in online or home-based activities. So these are just to stir up some thoughts for what you might do right now, since we're all stuck at home. The first 2 examples involve paid work. The second two are pretty much about extracurricular activities. And then there's an example of doing something at home. Okay, so on we go. Okay, so, oh, look at this delicious piece of cake. One of my students really liked to bake and developed some expertise in this among, friends and family said, oh, you're such a good baker. Can I buy some? So she actually started selling cakes on commission, and half the sales came from one cake, red velvet cake, and so she has a flagship product. It's something she can do all year round. It just depends on how much time she has available. She has learned about selling, marketing, and of course, just making her own money. So that's one example. Oh, look, here's like a thrashed phone or open phone. What is that? That's an Android. Okay. So this one student, he told me he is a hoarder, and I'm like, what are you hoarding? He's like, dead electronic parts. So he said his parents he was driving them crazy because he has all these broken parts in the garage. So he collects broken parts from neighbors. Then he resells them. He flips them on Craigslist. He doesn't receive an allowance, so that's actually that was a really he needed that money, I guess, if he wanted to do fun things. He's very, very frugal, and it gave him an outlet for engineering impulses. Also, I mean, I think people are just impressed if you could fix a dead phone. So he just got really good at that. I think he started doing this barely out of middle school. So anyway, so basically he took parts that were literally worthless, and he would, he'd restore these electronics so that people would want to buy them. So that's something you can think about. Oh my gosh, what is that? Oh, that's an arthropod. One of my students, he loved these. Love these, okay? He learned how to be their doctor. Like, they would get infections or they'd have different health problems. I didn't know they could have health problems, but he actually taught himself how to be like a insect veterinarian. And he connected to other parents of insects. He, as you see, his academic profile is really, like, the academic profile might not tell the full story, and he was ESL, but in his own way, he had a genuine relationship to science. It became the centerpiece of his college application. He talked about kind of how he grew by taking care of these little creatures. Anyway, so he was accepted to Purdue, which is probably not something he predicted about himself, UC Santa Cruz and UC Riverside. And like I said, a lot of UCs, they're looking at 3.9 averages for a lot of these UC campuses. So I think that's a great result, and also so is admission to Purdue. Okay. Next. Okay, I have a pair of shoes. So this student had pretty good GPA, average test scores. The family didn't really have extra money for stuff, including extracurricular activities. She really liked fine arts, like studio art, painting, that sort of thing, but also liked more pop culture things too, like Disney or Peanuts, cartoons. So she actually channeled her interest into custom painting shoes, which is apparently that's a thing. People like to buy custom painted shoes. So she would accept commissions for these. And actually that became a topic for personal statements. She was accepted into UC San Diego, Davis, and waitlisted at Berkeley. So that is the fourth case study. For the fifth case study, we have someone who loves making little movies. She had really high GPA and very good test scores. She had 3 subject tests above 750. Really interested in a lot of creative endeavors like writing, arts, photography. She made little trailers actually for her school for certain events to help the school promote those events. So she made short films and she learned analog photography. That's right, black and white photography. Photography actually became the subject of her personal statement, and she got into UPenn. Okay, so this person had really strong academics, also very active in sports, robotics, but she didn't think she was the creative type. Well, she always doodled in her boring classes. That's what she told me. She didn't put that in her college applications. That's just between, us. Okay. She decided to kind of put some structure around it and actually learn how to do calligraphy. She made gifts for her friends and family and used that skill in volunteering projects. It also became a topic of her personal statement. She was admitted to Cornell engineering. Oh, let's see. There's a chat question. Yes, so for the UC application, it's just one application and it gets submitted to all the UCs. Okay, there are many great online resources like Volunteer Match. This is a great place to find volunteer opportunities. They even have a way to search for teen-friendly activities, right? Things that maybe they're within a certain age group, or you can also search for things that you can do online. The Congressional Art Competition, it is something that is Congress does it, and you can look in your local district to find out if you have a Congress member who is participating. I think a lot of them participate in the Bay Area. Vans, the shoe company, they want to encourage creation of art, and they have a competition, high school clubs that want to enter, and then I think there's like a dollar prize that they could win by participating. Create Live, they have all kinds of classes in different creative topics. Code Academy, maybe adults have heard of this too. That's a great site for learning how to program in different languages for free. Congress also has an app challenge for coding at home. So that's something to look at. MIT, there are all kinds of great resources to consider this summer. Let's see, the Teen Inc. and the Teen Magazine, those are 2 publications that accept submitted works, if your work is submitted, then they're published in there. And KWHS, or Knowledge at Wharton High School, it's something put on by UPenn to test investment knowledge in high schoolers. So if you're interested in economics, that could be a great resource for you. If you're thinking, oh, there's nothing to do this summer, there's nothing I can do, trust me, there's plenty to do, and colleges will definitely expect you to do things. I don't recommend doing nothing, and there's plenty of things that you could be doing. Okay, so we have time for questions. Let's see.
Meilin?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
So we have a parent ask questions. I think we can start from her question.
Okay.
She asked, we know all UC campus use the same UC application system, but what about essay? When a student applies for different campus of UC, does he need to write different essay for each different campus? For example, if you apply 3 campuses of UC, does he need to write 4 essays or 12? 3 times 4 equals to 12 essays.
The UC application is something you can use to apply to every single UC campus. So you submit 4 essays no matter how many UCs you're applying to. However, there is an exception, okay? You're like, but Meilin, you just told me it's just one application. Yes, it is. However, if you're applying to UC campus to a specific program, that specific program might have a supplemental essay. So for example, a lot of the arts programs, they might have an artistic statement. There are different programs within the UC system. They reserve the right to tack on more supplemental essays if they feel like it. So there is, for example, a UC Berkeley management program. If you're interested in applying to that, in about, I think it's around December, they'll send you an email saying you must submit a supplemental essay. So the answer is yes. If you do the 4 essays on the normal UC application, you can use those 4 and they just go to every campus. However, it will depend on which specific program you're applying to, because each UC, each of their departments, they can decide to add on an admissions essay as part of their own process, because each UC admissions office, they follow their own processes. So the answer is, at minimum, you do 4. And for many majors, that's what you're doing. However, if you have a specific major or specific department, they can have requirements so that you're going to end up doing more, possibly. Any follow-up questions?
Yes, I picked some questions that parents asked. So the first question is, I have a parent ask, which one is more important, the extracurricular activities inside school or the extracurricular activities outside school? Which is more important to the college admission?
So it will depend on how serious the extracurricular activity inside the school is, but oftentimes it can be more impressive to do things outside of the school, because some high school clubs, quite frankly, they just meet for an hour each week, and then, maybe watch a movie, eat some snacks, right? However, there are some clubs that really do like serious fundraising or serious activities. Those clubs, maybe they have competitions, maybe they're super organized. That can be great. So the answer is, it depends. But if you can work with an organization outside of your school and be responsible in the company of adults, I think that indicates a lot of responsibility, a lot of maturity.
My next question is, I have a parent ask, she has questions about the UC auditing system. So could you give some examples, like detailed examples? Does UC audit the entire application, such as volunteering work or just part of the EA or any partial?
So let's go back to that slide. They can basically ask you anything on the application. So employment, honors and awards, academic history, extracurricular activities, volunteering, or information in the personal insight responses. So what that means is pretty much any part of the application is fair game. One way to verify, for example, is if you say, oh, I did, this many hours as a volunteer, and I built like 10 houses by myself, like I built 10 houses with Habitat for Humanity. They might ask, who was your supervisor, right? There are things that clearly you can't do by yourself as a teenager. You just wouldn't be allowed to do. So anything is fair game, and there's different ways to verify these kinds of information. If you say you worked a job, they might ask for your W-2, right? You want to kind of think about who might vouch for me, or what are some ways of documenting what I've done. For example, if you say, I sold a bunch of shoes and I made like $10,000, that's a lot of money for a high schooler to earn, right, by just reselling clothes. So you might want to keep an eye on your PayPal account, or so anything that you can offer to verify something. They want to make sure that you're not just making it up.
So it's definitely important to keep everything true. You don't want to.
Yes. So in another part of the UC application, at the front page, they say, there are many, many ways of saying this, but I always tell students, you definitely you never ever want to put anything false on here. And there's a story of some guy, he got into a bunch of colleges and he accepted scholarship. Well, he lied on his applications, and so not only did he get kicked out of those schools, he was then, I think he face charges for fraud, criminal fraud, because he accepted money. So
Wow.
this was not one of my students, obviously not.
Wow.
But even without this specific, auditing policy, colleges are very aware. And especially after all the varsity blues scandal, I think they're going to be even more aware of this, the potential for this kind of thing.
Yeah. So we have another parent ask that besides UCs, what about other schools? Do they verify? Do they do the auditing as well?
So other like private schools, they don't always share what their processes are. However, one of the purposes of requiring a counselor recommendation is that the counselor, right, the college can just call that person and say, wait, was this person really student body president and the football captain at the same time, as well as getting whatever level at the computer science Olympiad, right? They can just call that person. And also, right, because if the student is truly remarkable, probably the counselor will say something about your student. So in a way, even without auditing, that is a huge resource for colleges to rely on. That is one of the reasons letters of rec are so important. But yes, also, I mean, there are optional letters of rec. Like if you say, hey, I was a team captain, or I was doing this or that in an organization, if you list someone as an optional recommender, oh, this was my, volunteer supervisor, they can just call that person because you have nothing to hide.
The next question is, we have a parent ask the relationship between extracurricular activities and the personal statement. So I guess what she means is when you write your personal statement, how do you choose which story from your extracurricular activities to use, and how to make it related to your essay topic? What if your extracurricular activities are not related to the topic you want to write about? What you gonna do?
Okay, so every year, every single student tells me, they always say, Meilin, I have nothing to say. Every single time they say, I have nothing to say. I'm just empty. And so they always say that. They always think, okay, well, what about this question? I have nothing to say. So one thing is that you often have a choice. So for Common App, you choose 1 out of 7. For the UC application, you're picking 4 out of 8. But you're like, but Meilin, then I'm forced. I have to do 4 for the UC. And what if none of the Common App ones are good? Common App, of the 7, 1 of them is topic of your choice, meaning you can write about anything for Common App. And Common App covers, let's see, do we have okay, so Common App, there are hundreds and hundreds of colleges, all the Ivies, there are many out-of-state colleges, they're all using Common App. So usually there's some kind of choice. So I mean, my personal process, I actually work with students to really discover those important stories, things that a lot of times, things that maybe the student or the parents, they might not think are important. They can have great value in the writing process. Like one of my students was basically, he was like the parent, in the house, or of the house. He was like, and he didn't give it a second thought. But I asked him, well, how did this happen? How did you become? I mean, I know he's the oldest son, but what's the dynamic? And that turned out to be just such a great story. And he would never think of that. So that actually became a subject. I think I have a UCPIQ, an example of leadership in the home. Oh, somebody has a question about volunteer hours. Is there a minimum number of hours we suggest? So volunteering is not required by any college. There are many high schools, however, they sometimes have a requirement that you do volunteering in order to graduate, or they might make it part of like their living skills class. So no, it is not required for college applications, and there is not necessarily a minimum. However, I do recommend that you check with your high school. If your student is doing a lot of hours, there's oftentimes some kind of recognition available on the high school transcript. Like some high schools say if you do 100 volunteer hours, so they require you to record those hours. So it means you have to fill out a form. Your student, so the high school student has to fill out a form and then have the organization sign it and then give that back to the high school. So no, the answer is no, it's not required. But if you do it, there's better ways of doing it and making sure you actually record what you're doing.
Next question, we have a parent ask, do you provide any service for helping student essay writing, editing? If so, how? I guess she's asking your style on how you help the students
Sure.
on editing their essay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So I take not a scorched earth approach, but I mean, really, like I said, students, they start out saying, Meilin, I have nothing. I have 0, right? I have nothing. Okay, so then I don't assume that they know anything about the writing process because quite frankly, they don't teach this kind of writing in high school. They don't teach it anywhere in the K through 12 system. Even I've had students, they were the editors in chief of their high school, and this is still really challenging for them. So basically, I teach them how to write about themselves, how to pick topics, how to elaborate on topics, how to decide on the shape of the essay, how to polish it, just like every single step of the way, every possible step, even beyond what you can imagine. I've had students give me more than 20 drafts, but the process begins long before they start typing anything. The process really starts with listening to the student. So that's actually something that I do with students. I sit them down and we just talk, and a lot of things that they don't think are important, they can become great topics.
Our next question is, which application system do you recommend? Common App or Coalition, and why?
So depending on where you're applying, I mean, because Coalition, it has a somewhat smaller set of colleges, but there's a lot of overlap. So honestly, I think it's just a logistical choice. If you have a lot of colleges that, you feel more comfortable applying on one platform or another, I say do it that way, because your recommenders are going to be through whatever that platform might be. So if they're already on Common App, but you think, oh, I want to apply to something and it's only on Coalition, that's fine. You might end up doing both platforms, but it might be easier for your recommenders if they just do one, for example. Common App, there's I guess, tiny bit more space because you have 2 space for 10 activities as opposed to, I think Coalition has 8. But the essays, the personal statements are very similar. So I would say they're very, very close. Is there a specific situation? I don't know if that person has a specific situation. You want to give me a little bit more information about how you're choosing?
No, that's all her question is, but she didn't give me.
Do I have a list of everything?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I mean, we can look at them right now. I can tell you, I think I've memorized the UC prompts, but we could just take a quick look at them since if we're going to talk college apps, sure, why not? Why not look at the UC personal insight questions? Okay, so the UC gives you a choice of 8. The first one is asking about leadership experience. The second asks you to talk about your creative side. Your greatest talent or skill, that's number 3, how you've developed or demonstrated that over time. Doesn't that sound like something you might do by talking about an activity? 4, how did you take advantage of an opportunity or work to overcome a barrier you faced? The most significant challenge, that's number 5. Number 6, an academic subject that inspires you, how you just further this interest in or outside the classroom. So if you look at number 6, this is a perfect example. So What if, okay, so in school, let's say you really like English or math. So maybe that influenced how you chose classes, but that also might influence what you did outside of school. So maybe you took debate, or maybe you did robotics, right? Maybe you probably didn't just take the class. So number 6, this is a great question. Okay. Number 7, how you've made your school or community a better place. So any kind of volunteering or community service. And number 8, this is the sort of catch-all, what makes you stand out as candidate to the UC system. So that's the UC. Oh, Common App, we can take a quick look at Common App. As I said, they're going to be the same as last season. Okay, so here we go. All right, so same as last year. Some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent, so meaningful. They believe their application will be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, please share your story. Number 2 is about obstacles that affected you and what you've learned from the experience. Number 3, reflect on a time you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. What prompted your thinking? What was the outcome? And number 4, describe a problem you've solved or would like to solve. Number 5, an accomplishment, event, or realization that marked a period of personal growth. We do have a lot of questions. Ellie, you can schedule a free consultation.
Yeah. So for the parents that if you have further questions, feel free to contact us. We will have our email and phone number available on the slides. Yeah, we do have a few other questions that parents ask. Some schools don't request SAT or ACT like UC. My kids has already taken SAT but not ACT. Do you think still necessary to take ACT and why?
So I think it's actually great to take a mock exam of each and see if it makes any difference, because the formats are slightly different. For a lot of students, it really doesn't matter which test they take. So honestly, it's just whatever would yield like a better score. If your student has never done a practice ACT, you might as well just try. You can try a practice one. But as if you have one score and you feel like it reflects the skill level, that is okay. But like I said, I recommend take a mock exam, take a practice exam of each, and just figure out which one is a better fit so that you can report your best scores.
Next question. We have a parent ask, her daughter got an A on AP literature and SAT writing part, 780. And she's also a newspaper editor. So do you think does she still need help on her essay?
Yes.
The college application?
Yes, actually. So I think I mentioned earlier, but I have worked with multiple students who were the editors in chief at their high school. So they were the students telling other students, like helping them with their writing, supervising their writing, and of course writing a lot themselves. But they're doing newspaper writing. So they're talking about the prom or a current event, game or something. They're talking about things happening to other people. They're not talking about themselves, right? When I've worked with those students, it's really hard for them because they see themselves as really good at writing. However, they've never ever done this kind of writing. I tell them it's totally natural that they're struggling because no one has ever taught them how to write about themselves before. If you imagine, right, going to school, you're always told, listen to the teacher, do what the teacher says. Right? It's all about, analyze Dickens, analyze, such and such author. Nobody asks, well, what do you think? All right, maybe there's some of that, like take a position in your history class or social science or something. However, you're not talking about your own experience. You're not talking about your lived experience, right? So what that means is they don't develop the skill. So even if they are literally publishing, I've had students do internships at the New York Times, but they still need to ask, right? They still benefit from working with someone like me because, yeah, you could be at the New York Times writing, but it doesn't mean you know how to write your college essays. And the reason is it takes time and it takes a certain perspective in order to get those stories out. Just not something you do in high school. So yes, it's like preparing for an interview. It is all about the experience. I was working with a student who was applying to MBA school, and she's extremely introverted, and she was very uncomfortable about her like English language skills because she was ESL. She's very smart, very, very smart. but it was really hard for her to write about herself and to talk about herself. And she was an adult, right? I would say no matter how accomplished you might be in the realm of writing, I tell my students, even when they're really so-called weak at writing, I tell them, you know what, you're on an equal playing field. Like, you could be a so-called terrible writer at school. I've had students tell me flat out, they're like, Meilin, I hate writing. I'm like, it doesn't matter. All of you are terrible at this. You're all bad at doing college application essays because you've never learned how to do this, because they never taught you how to do this. So it doesn't matter if you get straight A's or straight D's or F's. None of you have learned how to do this kind of writing. And so one of the things I do when I work with students, I'm essentially teaching them how they can write about themselves, which is a totally distinct skill. So the answer is yes. You might have been published in in a newspaper. You might be the editor. You might get the 780 SAT. I have seen this, right, with my own eyes. Students working with me, they significantly benefit from having guidance like mine. So yes, you still may need help.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah,
it's actually, I think that you would think, oh, it's so easy for them, but I've seen it with my own eyes. They agonize. The one season, I told my students, okay, I know you guys are really stressed out, and I know you want to work on your college applications. I said, if you come to the office, I'll give you boba. So they're a bunch of kids who came to the office, they're having boba. At least two of them were editors-in-chief at their high school, respectively. And there were kids that were drinking boba who were not editors-in-chief, but they knew they all needed help.
Okay, the last question for today. We have a parent ask, the student got a perfect GPA, 4.0 unweighted GPA. And she is targeting UC Berkeley, UCLA, but she wants to ask how important the EA is, since she got a perfect score. She hasn't taken the real SAT yet, but her mock test is very high. So she's asking how important is the EA according to UC Berkeley, UCLA.
Okay. We're going to go back to one of the first slides. The answer is it's extremely important. I want you to imagine you are UC Berkeley. You're in the UC Berkeley office. You have an admit rate of 19%, which means the vast majority of applications you do not accept. I believe the freshman profile of the entering class, it's like a 4.25 or 4.3 or something UC average. So it's a very high GPA, and they have very high test scores on average. So how do you tell them apart? It is about the extracurricular activities. Why? Because the UC doesn't even have, right? They don't have a letter of rec process, but they give you 20 spots. That's right, 20. That's why I put this in yellow. 20 spots to report extracurricular activity. Yeah. So the answer is it matters a lot. It really does. And you can see it. And the UC itself, they say, we use a holistic process. And that's not just lip service. You can very clearly see what happens when people apply and they don't have extracurricular activities versus when they do. If we go down to my slide about what do admissions officers, what are they saying about all this? It shows your ability to motivate yourself, to manage time, to be mature, and to be a leader, right? If you can do these activities while you maintain good grades. Why is that? Because all of us now, if you have a certain amount of time, if you really focus, right, you can put time and you can push up your grades. You could put time in and really, push up your test scores. Sure, people can apply time, but it doesn't show creativity. It doesn't show leadership. All the things that make an applicant attractive, unfortunately, grades and test scores, they might not show that, right? So when I think about students getting into Berkeley, not a one had blank activities lists. Oh no, they had very robust activities lists. And every year we can see of our students who is getting into Berkeley. I can tell you this positive, you cannot get into Berkeley without a robust set of activities, extracurricular activities.
And thank you, Meilin, and thank you everybody to join our webinar. So if you have any questions or For the test optional link, if you want to get a full set of the test optional, you can leave us a message or send us an email. We'll send you the link of the full test optional. And we'll have upcoming webinars, then we will make announcement. If you're interested to sign up or sign up on our email list, feel free to contact us. So make sure you won't miss our webinars. Thank you.
Thank you. Look out for our 14 factor, was it the UC 14 factor webinars?